7 decades ago, the first television adaptation of Superman arrived. Now, it's time to rocket back to the 1952 to 1958 series Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves. In this rewatch podcast, my guests and I break down each episode, from its black and white crime drama beginnings to the kid-friendly color seasons, as we celebrate one of the most underrated Man of Steel depictions of all time. Welcome to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Season 1, Episode 22, CZAR of the Underworld, is returning guest Rich Roney. Welcome back.
Thanks for letting me join you. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
You're back in studio, and you are officially the most frequent guest on another exciting episode. This is your third appearance. You are number one in terms of number of appearances.
Thank you. And you know I've got great love. I've got great love and affection for this TV series. I did go basically on, for all practical purposes, probably a 45-year hiatus in watching these things, but getting back has been super, super enjoyable.
No, it's great. I always love getting your perspective, and I appreciate you going down this road again and revisiting.
Yeah, maybe a 50-year hiatus. You know, because I was like 10 and 11, 8, 9, 10. And then you've pulled me back in and I've derived great fun.
I mean, I imagine that it is fascinating to go back and look at these with adult eyes when you originally experienced them as a kid, because, and I know I've used these examples before, but I've experienced the same sort of thing going back and looking at old Power Rangers episodes, which was huge for me when I was a kid. And honestly, even something like Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. I mean, I was a really little kid when that was first airing, and then I got more into it and also derived more from it when I caught reruns in syndication on TNT when I was in late elementary school. It's like I remember being in 8th grade, and I remember watching, and that was the viewing of it that really cemented it more in my head. But even still, when I've gone back and I've watched them now, decades later, you just view it in a different way. You appreciate it in a different way. You think back to that time when you were a kid. So I'm sure it's interesting.
Totally. And I'm thrilled. I'm processing that you're coming right down to the end of season 1. I know I always get confused because The Mole Men was the feature, but then they kind of re-edited it to be the last 2. So for all practical purposes, we're down to the final 3 original.
Yeah. So next up in 2 weeks, we'll have Ghost Wolf, comic book artist V. Ken Marion, who previously joined me for The Secret of Superman. He'll be back. And then episode 24, Crime Wave, I'll be joined by Lou Koza, who is a Adventures of Superman and George Reeves historian. So I think it'll be really fascinating to get his perspective. Like yourself, you grew up watching it, so I'm excited to talk to him. And then Voices from Krypton author Ed Gross will be here to help me break down Superman and the Mole Men, a.k.a. The Unknown People, parts 1 and 2. This was a little bit of a debate I had when I first started out doing this. Do I start with Superman and the Mole Men, or do I save it for the end, the way that it's presented on the DVDs, for example, right, as the 2-part season finale? And ultimately, obviously, that's what I opted for, because I thought it would have a nice kind of full circle feel here, right? We could have very easily started with it. It was made first, but I kind of liked starting with Superman on Earth and then ending here and kind of tying it all together. So that's what's coming up over the next month and a half.
Okay. And am I the first person to do 3?
You are.
Okay. Now, I want to let you know and your listeners, I hope this discussion has the wallop of a Tommy gun, which is, folks, is a line plagiarizing what Inspector Henderson said at one point in the thing when he was talking to the bad guy. So I hope that energy comes forth in this discussion.
Yes. Rich has said that line, I think probably this is the 3rd time since he got here today, but I was like, save it for the show.
But I do want to ask, so I'm your third. In the episodes you've seen so far, how many times has a men's silk dressing gown been worn by one of the actors?
Yeah. Is it just that one, or was there one? Was there one more?
This one,
Oh,
Dinelli.
oh, that's right. I was thinking only of Clark. You're right. So I guess that was just a thing. But what did he have under it? Under it?
Oh, he had a tie and slacks to a suit.
Okay.
But he had a white shirt and a tie. Now, only because I Googled this just to read about this. Men's silk dressing gowns go back to the 1700s, right? But then early in America, I mean, like say around World War I, they were a symbol of status and wealth and luxury. And they also said that men wore these things because suits were more heavier, thicker, more constrictive. So they'd wear these at home to relax a little bit, right? All that being said, to your listeners, we analyzed an episode, No Holds Barred, where Clark came out, and you and I were both scratching our head. Like, what is going on, right? That poor guy has this big closet that burglars find that has one Superman suit, one business suit, and one silk dressing gown. That's it.
Yeah.
So when I saw the silk dressing gown worn by Dinelli, the bad guy, I had to research it. I thought you were going to bring that up, but Dinelli, even when Superman flies him at the end, or the mannequin, he's got that silk dressing gown on.
No, I'm glad you caught that. I didn't clock that specifically there. I guess my focus was elsewhere in this episode. There's a lot going on, but thank you. I'm glad that you did, and I appreciate the research. And yeah, I mean, we'll just chalk it up to a sign of the times. The silk robe in and of itself, I'm totally on board with. It's really just the dress clothes underneath. That's the thing that I bump up against. But listen, if it works for you, it's all good. So let's run down the specs of this episode. So this, as we said, season 1, episode 22, February 13th, 1953, written by Eugene Solo, directed by Tommy Carr. Our synopsis: Clark and Henderson head to Hollywood to consult on the motion picture CZAR of the Underworld, a crime expose based on Clark's series of articles about mob boss Luigi Dinelli, who is determined to put a stop to the movie's production by any means necessary. This was a standout episode. How did you feel?
I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed it. To me, it encapsulated all the B-movie tropes and themes. And I mean, it was fast-paced, full of action. It was a 22-minute B-movie serial. But it also had the stuff that I love. I mean, like you said in the synopsis, this showcases Clark's investigative reporting. It's all predicated on that. I wish they would have spent a little bit more time. And I want to let you pilot this, but I'm ambivalent on this, right? At the very, very, very outset, they speak about, hey, they have to go out, and Henderson and Clark go to Hollywood because of these crime exposés. The articles Clark wrote are the basis of the movie. But here's what I don't understand. I mean, and you're an attorney, right? I mean, one, if this guy's really this bad a guy, right? Where are the prosecutors? Where's the arm of the legal system going after him? Or what are the attorneys for the Daily Planet doing if they're making a movie out of this? Now, we know it's Clark, so we know he's going to be solid on his facts. But wouldn't they kind of be concerned about like lawsuits or... so that was a little bit of a plot hole. They jumped pretty quickly. And if Clark's in Metropolis and they had to take 3 planes to get out there, why is he doing an expose for people outside Los Angeles, right? Dinelli lives there. So I'm trying to put it all, but again, you know how I love Clark. The episodes where they showcase his abilities, like the whole thing with Double Trouble and his best friend, Colonel Redding in Army Intelligence. Well, that spoke to his subconscious, like, hey, Clark's got a connection to Army Intelligence. His knowledge of the sports promoter, Sam, I can't remember his name. So I've always liked the stories that showcase Clark's abilities and capabilities as Clark, not where he's, the subject of disdain from Lois, or not where his whole thing is, hey, I got to fix my shoelace. You run ahead, and then I'll go sneak and change to Superman. So the fact that this movie is based on his investigative reporting, I found very appealing.
I echo that totally. I really, really love the setup for this. Like you said, that Clark has accomplished something as a reporter, and that's the jumping off point. I did question exactly what you did, where, I mean, look, my understanding of the movie is that it's not a documentary that they're making. It's a fictionalized dramatization of Clark's articles. I mean, presumably true to life, but that they're making a movie about this guy based on the information that Clark had reported on. But yeah, I kept coming back to this idea of, well, how effective were the articles if this guy is still running around free? There was nothing about, oh, he just got out or he's pending trial or anything like that. So it really felt like we're so happy for Clark, but I guess it depends how you look at it. I mean, it's magnificent that his work is being celebrated and being adapted. But if the ultimate objective is getting this guy off the streets, we eventually get there by the end. But yeah, I did go back to that. It feels like we sort of missed the mark a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I did wonder about that. Like, and it's the fact that Henderson's going with him, right? So there's a degree of law enforcement having given input. So yeah, I was wondering, like, well, he didn't, when he was in his apartment in Hollywood or Los Angeles in his silk dressing gown, he didn't look, don't worry, they're going to take care of you. They're closer than you think, right? Yeah, I did wonder about the legalities. Where's law enforcement? I also wondered, like, well, wait, is Metropolis Chicago? Isn't this a long way away? Shouldn't he worry about his own hometown?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, and I don't recall offhand if there's any line in this that accounted for it, but again, maybe he had been based out of Metropolis when Clark wrote the articles, or is bi-coastal. That aspect of it I was okay with. But yeah, it was more just this idea of these highly effective articles, yet this guy's still out there. But presumably maybe there's an ongoing investigation, maybe something's pending, and we just didn't get in the weeds on that. But maybe there was more going on in the background. But again, I love that we see Clark's prowess as a reporter. Again, it happened before the episode. I always love to see more. But look, we get so much of him in reporter mode, so I can't complain. But yeah,
one other thing to expand on that. I don't know which episode this was, but I do know it was in season 1, where one of the underlings or the bad guys or the boss goes, hey, it's not Superman you got to worry about. It's Kent. Kent's the problem, right? So I always, that in this series, I love this portrayal, this rendition of Clark, and I love what George Reeves does. I mean, he embodies the best Clark to me. Very decisive, purposeful. I mean, moves with urgency and purpose. Yeah, he's not touchy-feely emo. He's, yeah. And the other thing, I'll jump back to it later, but I love this showcases his boxing prowess. We got to see him give a couple of, solid right punches, right hooks.
Yeah, as our previous guest, Zach Moore, teased me for using this phrase, but it is true. He engaged in fisticuffs in this episode, and it was tremendous. Yeah, there was so much about this, and I really love George Reeves in this episode. I love him all the time. His performance is such a highlight of this entire experience, but I felt like this episode in particular, Clark had this swagger about him right from the jump when he's talking to Dinelli on the phone, and he's like so pleased with himself.
It's Dinelli.
Yeah, it was really, really engaging to watch. I enjoyed his performance in this, and there's a lot of great bits from him as both Clark and Superman. And you mentioned Henderson. I thought this was a great two-hander for them in this episode, and I've joked about this in previous discussions where sometimes it feels like Perry as well, but you could say this with respect to Perry and anyone. Like sometimes it feels like Clark doesn't have a ton of respect for Henderson and the way he kind of, bosses him around, or the riddle of the Chinese jade in particular. That was one where it seemed like there was a little bit more friction between the two of them in terms of how Henderson was handling the investigation. Again, I'm not saying they're at each other's throats, but it's just even another episode that just comes to mind where Clark's, hey, Henderson, and just kind of grabs him. Again, nothing egregious, but it again, just didn't necessarily always seem like such a buddy type thing. So I enjoyed seeing the two of them here, and it felt to me at least like they were kind of on equal footing as they were making their way through this episode. So I enjoyed the dynamic between the two of them here. Not that I've disliked it in the other episodes. And look, I have taken Henderson to task. I don't know that he's necessarily the best at his job in a lot of instances, but I liked Henderson on his own here, and I liked the interplay with him and Clark and Superman in this episode. I thought it was a really good showcase for those relationships.
I agree. I have not. I've cherry picked the episodes I've watched, so I haven't been as methodical as you. But the some of the episodes I liked again was that Double Trouble episode, where I thought it was interesting how Clark and Henderson compared notes, right? I like it when I haven't seen the things where Clark has been perhaps disdainful. I haven't seen that. I do know I caught a few moments of that wax museum one, and it was interesting. They were out in the docks, and Clark and Henderson were like looking down, and Clark was explaining, and Henderson seemed to track with all that. So I haven't seen the goofball, or I haven't seen things where that's not the right word, but where Clark is dismissive or disdainful.
Yeah, and again, it's not like he's outwardly hostile or anything like that, but again, just kind of a little bit of that flavor. And again, I think Riddle of the Chinese Jade in particular was a good one where it really felt like you saw more friction.
I'll watch that.
Yeah,
I've only cherry picked.
Gotcha. At least that's been my read on it. You might have a different interpretation as you watch it, but so I enjoyed that aspect of it. And yeah, I'll say this, and then we'll go kind of through our scene by scene breakdown. But there was only one scene in this entire episode that I felt, why is this here?
Perry?
Yeah, the Perry scene.
I thought about that, and I've got some notes on that. What I noticed, if I may, there was absolutely no Lois whatsoever. Jimmy was in only for one tiny brief scene, very brief. And then my favorite, the sixth man, Stephen Carr. I mean, and I'm going to take a minute on this for the benefit of your listeners. I look at this TV show, right? You've got George Reeves, you've got Lois, Jimmy, Perry, Henderson, and then the guy who's been in the most episodes all throughout season one is Stephen Carr, Hadley, And once again, he's the guy that comes off the bench. He's the sixth man.
As Mr. Carr in this episode.
Yes. And I think this is the final appearance he ever makes in the series.
Oh, that's a shame. We'll keep an eye out for the last couple.
Well, at least he wasn't the movie star in this one.
Yeah, yes, I know. Well, so, on that note, again, just as far as big picture takeaways, so we do have a scene that we'll get to where one of the actors in the movie is killed. There's a gun, and the assumption is that it's a blank in it, but someone had actually put a real bullet in. I mean, it was crazy to watch that after recent real world events with the Alec Baldwin shooting on that Rust movie. So it was kind of crazy to, again, I mean, that happens, but to have seen again such a very recent high profile example of something like that, and then to see it on the show. I mean, again, this was obviously purposeful and was murder as opposed to everything that went on the set of that movie. But I couldn't help but think of that.
Same here.
Yeah.
I took a page from your book. I watched this episode twice, and I know your desire is to go through this kind of as it was portrayed on the screen. One thing I'm gonna say fast, and then I'll throw the ball back to you. In your prior episode with Bedemillion Butler, right? They're certainly getting a lot of play out of the windows in the Daily Planet.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw great similarities between a police officer, delaying what the bad guys want to do, both in the prior episode and then in this episode when Henderson goes, okay, I'll give you the phone. And then he just obscures.
Yes, I know. That's true. That's a good catch. Definitely. So real quick, just a guest star rundown. So we mentioned Tommy Carr as Mr. Carr, and then
Stephen Carr.
Stephen Carr. Good catch. And then our two main guest stars, Tony Caruso as Luigi Dinelli, John Maxwell as the studio police chief. So, okay, we'll get to this in the episode, but as we learn, as the episode unfolds, Luigi has this brother, Frank, who had been in prison and then sort of fell off the face of the earth and no one knew what happened to him. And the twist that we get here is that the studio police chief who has been investigating is actually the brother. Now, I think you and I both, when we watched this a couple of years ago, missed the studio part.
I did too. The second time I thought he was a police chief in Los Angeles.
As did I. And that was one of the things. And we did 2 episodes on my other podcast, Digging for Kryptonite, all about, really the entirety of the Adventures of Superman series. And again, it was so enjoyable. That's why I wanted to do this podcast and go episode by episode. But I feel like if you go back and listen to that episode, we probably joked about how on earth could this guy end up becoming chief of police in Hollywood. He wasn't.
But it was really only, if I may, reading IMDb and seeing one of the synopsis statements. When I watched this the first time, I thought he was a police official for Los Angeles. I do want to go through this sequentially, but I want to come back to that later. At that one point when the studio police chief or the studio security chief is in that trailer with Clark.
And that's the thing too. And audience, I'd welcome your input on this as well, because I agree. I finished this episode still under that same impression that you and I had a couple of years ago. And to your point, it really was in looking at IMDb and a couple of other articles or reviews about the episode where the studio police chief was specified. So, I'm still not 1,000% sure. It definitely makes far more sense if he's the studio, studio security as opposed to actual police chief.
But to go a heartbeat further, right? Luigi Dinelli, who must be some big bad because Clark did all these crime exposés on this guy. Again, like we said like 5 minutes ago, Luigi Dinelli is now in Los Angeles. Now, is Clark doing stories on Los Angeles crime and corruption? Or is this guy a transplanted guy from Metropolis? But then what are the odds that the secret brother of the crime boss becomes a security chief in the very studio making a movie about? I mean, this is B movies like, hey, we've only got 8 actors. We can't get into plot too much.
Yeah, I know that is tough to reconcile. I guess I'll say this, regardless of either way, his brother again has taken on this new identity and has achieved a position of authority and of
respect,
credibility, respect, right? Regardless of exactly what his job is or what level of prominence, the same basic idea is there. So we'll go with it. But yeah, let's go scene by scene through CZAR of the Underworld. So we start with the scene that you and I have joked about a lot, where we have Henderson and Clark in Clark's office at the Daily Planet. We got 2 guys across the street, and we quickly glean what the setup is. Dinelli is going to get Clark on the phone, get him in position so that these guys can shoot him and take him out through the window. And as you said, Henderson kind of gums up the works by standing in their direct line of sight. And again, you get a lot of, like we said before, that swagger that Clark has as he's talking to Dinelli. And again, we get a lot of helpful information here about, again, all that setup that we talked about these articles and the movie that's being made. And I guess most critically here is that we're kind of on the clock because Clark and Henderson have to go catch their plane to Los Angeles. Do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, as you said, they do some nice setup. And it is fun. I mean, the second time I watched it, I love it when Clark picks up the phone. He is so happy, right? And he's almost like, come on, give me your best shot, Dinelli. You know, he's smiling. Well, we're coming out to Hollywood. We're going to help with the production. So they got 5 minutes to get out of Clark's office. They must have had different luggage in those days than I'm accustomed to, because they had like 2 briefcases. But Clark goes to Henderson, hey, what time do we have to leave? We got 5 minutes. I'll be ready in 4, right? And then, as you said, they've got a sniper and a guy with binoculars across the street ready to basically assassinate Clark. What I found, and you stop me if I'm going too fast, but what I found so fascinating, what I noticed the second time I watched this, when after the gun jams and they fix it, and Dinelli must be worrying, what are those guys doing? Finally, the lamp falls over, and then you hear the gunshot, right? So the special effects were a little out of sync. The lamp neck on Clark's desk appears to be hit, falls over, then you hear the gunshot after the fact. And the thing I loved, quite frankly, was Henderson gets his gun out, and then Clark goes, no, come on, we got to make the plane. And he just rushed right out. He didn't even close the file cabinet drawer. Henderson didn't even put his gun away. They had to run out so fast.
Yeah, that's the part about it that's so funny. It's just like there's been this assassination attempt on Clark's life. There's been this...
And the police inspector that you know...
Yeah. And
no, we'll get it later.
well, yeah, I know. The fact that they leave. And again, the episode has to keep moving forward. It's fine, but it's just so funny to me. It's like, this is a pretty extreme situation to just be like, well, we got to go.
Yeah, we got to make that plane.
So that was humorous, but a great kickoff, I think, to this episode, because you see the stakes, right? You see that, Dinelli is committed to putting a stop to the production of this movie, and, we'll do anything it takes to make that happen, to stop Clark, to stop the movie. So I think that very quickly establishes the tension as we're moving forward here. We got some stock footage of planes and airports and all that. And we see that the driver of the car that's been sent by National Studios to pick them up, he gets taken out by the 2 bad guys.
Paul Fix.
Yes. And then, yeah, I hadn't listed him in our guest star breakdown, so thank you. And so they lead Henderson and Clark out to the car. As you mentioned, yeah, they've got seemingly very minimal luggage, a couple of briefcase-looking items. But again, it's like, well, how much do they have? They're wearing their suit and they've got their silk robe. That's all they need. And a Superman costume.
For the entire series, Clark and Henderson had the same suits.
Yeah.
What I found is a credit to the production, right? Just crank these things out. What I thought was funny is they show the exterior of, I think, like Ontario Airport or Long Beach Airport in Southern California. The bad guy takes over the car that the studio sent. But what I thought was so hilarious is when they walk through this dump of a warehouse, and Clark goes, so this is Hollywood. And all you see is this like dirty warehouse wall. It was the same set as the thing for Double Trouble with the ship, the ocean liner coming in, right? But so this is Hollywood. And it like, Jesus, what a credit to his acting ability.
Yeah, you got to sell it.
And quite frankly, they couldn't do any exterior shots because they always used the Los Angeles City Hall as the Daily Planet building. So it would have confused some poor 9-year-old kid to go, hey, we're in Los Angeles. They got the same building as the Daily Planet.
Yeah, I know. They would have given it away. I love when Henderson and Clark are in the car and Henderson's like, I hope I meet some movie stars. And Clark's like, I just want 5 minutes with Dinelli. And it's great. And it's that quintessential 50s George Reeves Clark that we're always lauding, and it's great. And you buy it, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to mess with this Clark, but I love that. I just love that moment.
Oh, and in the episode you're going to see next, right? There's another tough version. I'll say this: that Ghost Wolf, is that what it is? Well, there's, I vaguely remember they're riding up on the train, right? And Lois says, he seems like a nice guy. And I wouldn't be too sure, We'll have to find out. Well, what if he doesn't tell us? We'll take it out of him the hard way. We'll make him talk the hard way, So Clark.
It's great. It's just, again, as we've been saying all season, it's just a different flavor of Clark. It is very much a departure from what we've gotten in the years since. And there's something that's very refreshing about seeing this kind of Clark. So I'm here for it, as I've been saying in all of these episodes. So next, the fake driver brings them to this garage and locks them in and is going to serve them up to Dinelli. And you may mention Double Trouble, and I thought of Double Trouble because Clark needs
stay perfectly
quiet.
still.
Yeah, so it's dark, just like when he was locked in that safe or that vault in Germany in Double Trouble.
No one move.
Yeah, he needs, and it was a specific amount of time in that episode
30
too.
seconds, yeah.
Yeah, and same thing here. So he's in the back of the car in the dark with Henderson, and he's just like, I need total silence. Like, be quiet. And then, of course, we see he has freed himself and quickly changes into Superman. And I love how he bonks their heads twice. I thought that was amazing, where he bonks their heads together, and then he looks and he sees that their eyes are still kind of open, and he gives them another one. So good. But the thing with the silence is, I guess in the Double Trouble episode, he was cracked. Wait, refresh my memory. When they were in the safe, did he just like push it open, or did he actually, was he using his hearing and he cracked the
I
code?
thought it was all strength.
So, okay, so then that makes it even odder to me that he needs total silence. Like, wouldn't you think if you were trying to slip out and change into another person,
some
you'd be
camouflage,
like, you'd be like, scream for help, get out, right?
Yeah. In each of those things, I don't think he used in Double Trouble. I thought it was all strength. He just kind of like turned it in such a way that the tumblers hit a certain thing and he muscled it open.
Yeah.
Here, he was like a ninja, right? Kent, where are you going? Next thing you see is him pop up in the back of their car and knock their heads together.
You got to admire the commitment. Like, I mean, I guess from a production standpoint, it's like they want to show him as Superman, but It's like that was two quick changes for really nothing, right? Because he just came up on them from behind and could have just done that.
I agree. I thought about that for an 8-year-old child or they want to see Superman.
Exactly.
It would not have worked. You and I, from an expediency standpoint, well, look, nobody's going to see you. Have Clark bang their heads together.
And then we get, one of the other big picture things about this episode that I love, there are some really great moments of discussion about Clark potentially being Superman or him slipping up. There are a few like really, really, really key moments here. And the first one occurs here where Henderson and Clark have this discussion. And Clark says Superman taught him a trick.
Yeah, it's one of the tricks Superman taught.
And then Henderson says, go for
Kent, it. Sometimes I think you are Superman. And I forget what Clark says after that. As he leaves Henderson, Clark becomes the chauffeur, right?
Yeah.
He hops in the front seat but yeah, as I remember, after the decoy bad guy left him in there and I didn't understand. Was he just going to leave him locked in there for Dinelli to come down and shoot him?
That's
what I'm assuming. Clark breaks the chain, opens the big door, walks in, and Henderson goes, "How did you do that?" Oh, it's a trick Superman taught me, right? Kent, sometimes I think you are Superman. And there's a couple of more slip-ups.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to those.
Yeah.
I forget exactly what Clark says in response, but I think he says something like, I think I'd have to be to something. It's something like that. I forget offhand, but yeah, it's the first of those moments. But it's, again, regardless of the exact line, it just kind of speaks to this overall strategy that Clark employs in this series with respect to the secret identity that I love. Like, because I guess we've seen, look, I spent 10 years watching Smallville, where even though it wasn't a dual identity, he had this whole secret, massive secret, and always coming up with excuses. Lois and Clark, for those first couple of seasons before Lois learned the secret, it was a lot of, oh, I have a dentist appointment that I forgot about. I got to run off. Like all of these excuses. But I love how this Clark just leans into it. And it's almost like daring the person. And again, I know we've talked about this a lot, but just the psychological effect where, again, depending how you look at it, I still think there's some credibility to the theory that like everybody knows, and this is kind of like they're cool about it.
Tacit, yeah.
But but like for argument's sake, like let's say they don't know, and I think ultimately what the show is saying is that they don't know. There is something where it's like you dare the person to be like, yeah, like call me out, say I'm Superman. It's like it works, like it weirdly works.
He does it a few other times, like was it Superman on Earth when he rescues the guy that fell out of the dirigible or something like that? You know, and at the end, Lois goes. Something, he goes, well, maybe I am Superman, Lois. And then he gives, that wink to the camera. There's a few times where he brazenly, almost, dares them. He leans into it. That's a perfect words.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. So then we get this montage of Dinelli's goons impeding the production of this movie. They're attacking people. They're sabotaging offices,
lighting the film, burning the film.
And then this culminates with the scene that we were discussing earlier, where the lead actor on the film is shot with what's supposed to be a blank and is actually a real bullet, and he dies. And then this launches the larger investigation. But like I said before, just again, a lot of shades of very recent real world scenario.
Yes.
And then this takes us to, again, really the only scene in this episode. I'm really debating, Rich, because, at the end of this, we'll give our rating, our Fedora rating out of 5. And I want to give this one a 5, but I feel like I might have to ding it for this.
Because of Perry.
I might have to ding it half a Fedora for this Perry scene. This felt so tacked on, where Jim has come in.
It felt like filler.
Yeah, like Jim's come in. They've gotten word from one of the press wire services, the knock. Go for it.
The knock.
Yeah.
I telegraphed that.
Go for it.
Well, again, this is another goof. Like the whole thing with, boom, the light falls down. Then you hear bang, right? And something hit the light, knocked it off the desk. Then you hear the shot. On this one, you hear a knock on the door. Perry goes, come in. Jimmy walks in, and then Perry rips his head off. How many times did I tell you not to come in here without knocking, right? Well, Jimmy did knock. But Jimmy's only in for a microsecond.
Yeah, he's there real quick just to deliver this news about the murder on the set of the movie. And the whole knocking business is funny. I mean, I wish it would have been great if Jack Larson had been in the moment and been like, but Chief, I did. And he's like, oh, like if they had kind of because you can chalk it up to Perry just being Perry and being gruff and not even like the knock didn't even register.
I spoke about the tropes. And they really play into Perry as the cranky old curmudgeon.
Yes.
Right? Who's just cranky. I really thought this was filler of some type because it went on too long. I don't know if they didn't have anything for Lois.
Yeah. Well, just real quick with Perry. So a couple episodes ago, we covered The Evil 3. And that was one I talked about it in that episode. But it was really nice to see a little bit of a different side to Perry, especially when Jim is real freaked out and Perry's kind of trying to like calm him down a little bit. And again, you just got to see a little bit more of that paternal side. You got to see a few different sides of Perry in that episode. So that, a little bit goes a long way, I think, because otherwise if it's just gruff and that's it, then it becomes one note. So in fairness to the show, I feel like we have seen some other sides. But yeah, in this scene, it's just typical gruff Perry. And so he gets Henderson on the line at the movie studio and is just barking at Henderson about why Clark didn't call and report this in, why Perry had to learn about this news from one of the wire services, despite the fact that his own reporter is there on the scene.
Yeah. Perry got a little too sarcastic, like, why would anyone tell me? I'm only the editor of the paper. My star reporter's out there. We could have had a solo story. Perry leaned into it a lot and overplayed it. And I think it just ran too long. It was like they had to fill a minute or something.
It definitely felt that way, and it for all we know, maybe it was the episode just came in short, and they were like, "We need something," and that was something quick that they could add. I can appreciate that. That's fine. It doesn't ruin the episode. It was just that it just felt so tacked on, and I agree, it went on too long. Especially it got to a point where Perry was really just saying the same thing just over and over, like a few too many times, and it's like, okay, we're kind of going around in circles here. The other thing is that this would have been more impactful if Clark had been on the other line, and you could have at least gotten to see Clark's reaction, and we could probably guess what it would have been. And if Clark had been the one to hang up on him or something like that, like he's barking all of this at Henderson. Henderson's really got nothing to do with the Daily Planet side of it, so that doesn't really go anywhere. And then here's the thing. And look, when we talk about it, like, this is what we're here for. We analyze it. We share what we think would have been interesting, whatever. If this scene doesn't bug you, great. But the thing that I just keep coming back to is that if there had been any kind of payoff to it, see, like at the very end of this episode, if Superman had said something like, "Oh, Clark's gonna get the scoop on this story," or if Clark showed up at the end and was like, Perry's gonna you know what I mean? Like some kind of payoff to this. You don't get anything.
I agree, and we'll get to it later. But the absolute end did seem very abrupt.
That's the thing. Like they could have very easily, because I know we're kind of making excuses for the scene. It's like, oh, they needed to fill, but it's like there was another
They
instance.
could have shortened this scene.
Yep.
And then at the very end, had Clark go, "Hey, I got to type this up. I got to get it on the teletype to get it back to Metropolis." But because at the absolute end, it seemed very abrupt when Superman gives his stern commentary.
Yeah. So look, it's fine. I mean, look, on the other hand, at least we get to see two of our other cast members in a Lois Less episode. At least we get to check in with the Daily Planet. But yeah, that scene just felt out of place. But I don't want to belabor the point here. So after this, we have Clark and Henderson and the chief and Mr. Carr and the director too, right?
I thought it was the studio president who came.
Maybe.
They all came to, and help me, was it Alan Decker or Alan Dexter was the murdered star?
Yep.
Well, somehow he had some sort of van.
High-tech. Well, it's a trailer, right?
Trailer.
But it seemed to be, he had all the latest amenities. Yeah.
Yeah. He had it like refurbished, running water, electricity. He had it really spiffed up. And I guess it was a forerunner to the sort of things you'd see trailers on television shows. But Clark deliberately volunteers to sleep in there.
To sleep in a dead man's trailer the night after the man is murdered.
Right. Now, I'm going to do an interjection here. I got to tell you, I think Henderson likes to live on the expense account, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because this guy just got shot a couple of hours ago, right? And Clark goes into the trailer to kind of get organized for the evening, and Henderson goes to the security police hey, want to go grab a beer? He didn't seem too worried about that murder.
No, not so much. Well, look, for Henderson, I guess
it's not his jurisdiction.
Vacation. Yeah, I mean, that I like the aspect of this from the start. I think for both of them, when they first arrive, and the chauffeur, the fake chauffeur, but they don't know that, is there to escort them out, and they go to the car. I mean, it's a different type of experience. I mean, like I was funny because I was thinking about this. But you and I have both done a lot of traveling, you far more than me, but we've traveled for work, and it's like you have your expense account, and it's like nothing, I've never used it for anything extravagant, but even just getting a car service, or we'll talk about room service later with Henderson, but he's a little, it's kind of a nice, something nice to indulge in a little bit when you can, whether it's for work or otherwise. So for Clark and Henderson, but then definitely especially Henderson, to sort of be basking
let's go to the Mark Stevens, I got a suite.
Yeah, it rang true, but yes, I agree. It's a little bit like, hey, read the room. There was just been a murder. Yeah, it's like the studio president is like, what's with these guys? One guy wants to sleep in his trailer, and the other one is like talking about his hotel. Like they're really,
yeah.
But there's I love Clark's line where he's like, "Well, you're welcome to keep me company, Inspector Henderson."
Yeah, and I don't know how that would fly today, right? This was like some of the stuff in earlier episodes or the commercials, like, oh, it's okay for Jimmy to wake up with Clark and have cereal, but You can't have Lois doing it, right? And I did pick up on that. Like, well, you're welcome to stay with me tonight if you want. Not me, pal. I got a suite at the Mark Stevens.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think after this, there's a quick scene of Dinelli kind of putting out the hit on Clark.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. One of I forget how. I guess Paul Fix, the phony driver, kind of goes, "Hey, the star was hit, but Kent's going to stay in his trailer tonight." And then he goes, "Yeah, hey, call Frank and tell him he's got a job tonight, right?" But I don't know how the guy that got his head smashed together got out so quickly, nor how he learned that unless Frank called him and said, here's what's going on.
Yeah, that's a little nebulous, but I don't know. I assume he's got multiple people that he pays off on that studio set who like feed him information or something like that. I can go along with that. And then later we have Clark and the chief in the trailer talking about this brother who, again, we'll later learn is the chief himself. But at this point in time, this was I felt like this information came out of nowhere, right? Had they mentioned anything about a brother earlier?
No, it surprised me because even as they were going through that folder that the chief brought in, Clark said something like, "Hey, I'm not worried about Luigi. It's his brother who vanished like X number of years ago. He's the one." And then the chief goes through this story like, well, he probably, did he say like he was at...
It was too specific. He was
he was at Sing Sing. And
yeah, he probably got out and then he got a facelift and he changed his name. And
like, plastic surgery and started a new life. But to go a step further, I want to let that breathe. Yeah. So, but what happened to Clark's super hearing? When they're in the trailer, they did start portraying, maybe it was a red herring to take us in a different direction, but the security chief was super cooperative, right? Very cooperative, very open. He hears something outside. What the freak where's Clark super hearing? The security guy writes, "Hey, someone's outside. Keep talking," right? It just baffled me that the security guy has better hearing than Clark. That baffled me.
I mean, not to get too, nerdy or fanboyish about this, but I mean, I guess it's funny talking about a current Superman television show, Superman and Lois. They talked a good bit about how the super hearing works because in that show he has a son with powers and Clark is teaching him how to use it. And very early on this came up and Clark talked about how he trained himself. So it's like, it's not that he hears everything all the time, but he's sort of attuned to kind of like disturbances in the normal wavelength. So someone screaming or a huge explosion, like that sort of variation kind of gets the antenna up, but it's not like he's just like listening to everything all the time. Like he would go crazy. So, I mean, I guess we're another way of, so it's, again, really not to split hairs about this. And I'm sure there's a better explanation of it than what I'm giving here, but like, it's not, so at least the way that show presented it, it's not even so much like turning it on and off. It's just like kind of always listening for those fluctuations, those disturbances in kind of the sound waves.
Okay.
So in a case like this, I don't know. I guess that wasn't unusual. Like whatever was going on outside, like the Mr. Carr walking, it wasn't enough to kind of do. I mean, I don't know. The other thing, I mean, again, that was a pretty specific description I think that show gave. I mean, I feel like in other instances it's more, because I do think about this a lot where this show and other instances, it's like you have these super senses. It's like you need to use them more. Like there have been a few episodes where I've said this, where it's like the House of or the Mystery in Wax episode. It's like if he had just used his X-ray vision when he was in the Wax Museum, it's like he would have found everyone down below.
The same thing with the jade. Right? Like it. Didn't he see the ladder? Why did he have to go outside and like look all over the street?
Oh, that was, we had fun talking about that. That was pretty hilarious.
That was, talk about filler, right?
That was another instance of, well, we have to show Superman
in
this
costume,
episode,
right? Yeah. But he spent so much time, right? When he knew right where it was, where the trap door to the ladder, and then also no holds barred. He was outside, and at one point before Sam comes over to him, he's like leaning against the wall, listening through the brick wall to, I guess, Ram getting beaten up or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it would make things too easy, but I know you do think about that a lot. It's like you have these tools at your disposal, and it's just when and again, I know we can't think about this too much in terms of what you would actually do, but it's just like, wouldn't you? Again, you just have these abilities, so it's like it would. I feel like at a certain point, it would just become part of. It would almost be an automatic, like it would just be part of your investigation, right? It's like wherever you are, it's like give it a quick scan.
Well, and even there was one thing I did like that Superman Batman series. Ed McGuinness was the artist,
Yeah.
Loeb was the writer. But in one of the very first issues, I think the Earth 22 Superman came back to, right? And the older Superman's kind of telling the younger Superman, that's it, Clark, check me out with your x-ray vision. That's what I do, right? So like to your point, if you've got these senses, wouldn't you leverage every technique, everything you could tap into to help yourself? So it surprised me that the security, the studio chief, hears the thing, is quick enough to write a note to Clark as they're going over his own file.
Yeah, I know that was pretty fun. And then Clark excuses himself, and the chief is pretty, kind of persistent about trying to go with Clark. Clark's like, I need to go see someone who's, we say, allergic to uniforms, and especially police uniforms, and so he's able to kind of, shake.
No, I need some
shake the
time
chief
by
off.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which leads to probably my favorite scene of the episode, where Superman smashes through Dinelli's window. What?
I'm getting confused now. Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I got keep going. I got confused.
No, all good. So yeah, he smashes through the window of Dinelli's place. You've got the guys who are shooting at him, and of course he's deflecting the bullets. They throw the gun at him. We don't have an instance of a stuntman ducking this time. He just stands there as the gun bounces off of him. He once again engages in fisticuffs, clocks him, which is great. But my hands down, my favorite part, honestly, the smashing of the window was great because it's like he could have probably opened it but like he wanted to make a point, and like I love that. Like, I love how he just smashed it in. But then my favorite part of this scene is when Dinelli's like, "What do you want?" or "What are you doing?" He's like,
You're getting a little nervous, Dinelli.
Yeah.
Your shot, your aim's off.
But he goes, as he punches him, he goes, "I want to show you how movies are made." Pop. That was so badass. That was, oh man, that is one of my top season 1 moments. I just thought that was great. The punch and the line. I want to show you how movies are made. Boom. Loved it.
It's well done. I mean, we saw a right cross, a right hook. Yeah, because he hid behind the door and took out each of the underlings as they came in. Right punch with the right hand, punch with the left, and then he went and then all the bullets bounced off. He took out Dinelli.
Yeah, that was great. That was a top-notch scene. I really enjoyed that. So he flies Dinelli back, and this is again clearly the dummy. Yeah, look, it's fine. Especially as we always say, for the time period, the devices on which people were watching these things, the ability to pause and rewind, will go along with it. He puts him in the trailer. Now, I was wondering about that. And what's your read on this? Because we get why Clark makes a big point of telling everyone, I'm going to stay in the trailer, right? Because he knows that'll get back to Dinelli, and he knows that whoever's working for Dinelli, whether it's actually the brother who Clark, that's the other thing too, that going back to what we were saying at the top and about how, Clark's articles, they were good enough to warrant this movie adaptation, but they didn't put Dinelli behind bars. But I liked when they introduced the brother component, even though it felt like it came out of nowhere, at least it was like, okay, his investigation is ongoing. There's still something he's trying to work out.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
So I like that aspect. But so he makes the point about staying at the trailer, right? So it's like, it becomes clear, like he wants to flesh out.
He's the bait.
Yeah. But once the word is out that Clark is in there, the hitman's going to be coming. It's like it's just interesting. Like he really puts Dinelli
at risk,
in severe danger here. Were you comfortable with that? I mean, it's like, it was fine, but it was just kind of funny to me. It's like, cause you could have achieved the same result with just like put like a pillow under the blanket or something.
Yeah. When I saw it, especially the second time, when he takes Dinelli back and he carries Dinelli, through the studio door. He lands with the dummy, goes through, and then carries him into the trailer. I did question well, why is he doing this? I mean, he just knocked this guy out cold. He could get him at the end when he apprehends the assassin or the guy trying to kill him and pull him together then. But he made it a point to dump Dinelli in the trailer itself, exposing him to risk. I didn't dwell on it too much. I mean, I think back in the time, we've discussed this before, they really weren't worried about your civil rights that much, how many times do we see Henderson, okay, we'll do it the hard way, roll up his sleeves, and the implication is he's smacking the guy around.
Yeah.
Clark wasn't too worried about anything happening to Luigi Dinelli.
No. I think it's definitely in line with the times and this incarnation of Superman and sense of morality. It was just kind of funny because it's
quite frankly, Superman kidnapped him. He assaulted the other guys. He destroyed property that wasn't his own. Knocked those guys around, knocked them out, knocked out Dinelli, and basically kidnapped him.
At this point, Superman now heads over to Henderson's hotel. Henderson is just having the time of his life with
steak dinner, buddy, at the Mark Stevens.
Steak. Yeah, that room service steak. He's all about it.
Yeah, I loved that. I mean, Henderson must really like putting on the feed bag, right? I mean, the last time we saw him, a couple hours after a murder, hey, feel like grabbing a beer? He says, not my jurisdiction, right? And here he goes, come on in. Hey, waiter, I think I'll have another steak, right? And Superman kind of jokes and you go, oh, okay. And well, actually, I was just finishing Kent's steak. So he's going to have 3.
Yeah. Well, you know what, though? In Henderson's defense, he is a police inspector. So, and it's not his jurisdiction. So, I mean, I think we're looking at it from the perspective of there was just a murder here. There was a dead body. It's for him, that's just another day.
It's like a waitress, not my table.
Yeah. So the fact that he's ready to get some beers and how many steaks? But the fact that he's ready to indulge. Yeah. I mean, I think that tracks. I thought it would have been so funny though, because Henderson has his back to the door when Superman walks in, and Superman starts talking before Henderson sees him. And I thought it would have been great if he was like, oh, hey, Clark. Oh, Superman. Right? Because it's not like we get any real variation in voice here.
No, I didn't think about that. And, it is kind of a dumb move to have your back to the door where anybody could walk in. And hours earlier, there was a murder. And you're one of the guys.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's you're one of the targets here, pal. But I love, this is one of my other favorite moments of this episode because Henderson makes some crack about Clark. Because Clark's not there, obviously. He makes some remark about Clark, and Superman says, well, I'm sure Kent's not just twiddling his thumbs wherever he is.
I do remember that.
And I know we're sort of, we're analyzing, and I know, or I assume there wasn't necessarily all that much intended, when they were putting these episodes together, as far as how detailed we are in unpacking them and analyzing what was going on through the characters' minds and all of that. But I love, because it's in Superman's interest, right? Clark/Superman's interest for people to think that it would be unlikely for Clark to be Superman, right? For when Henderson, and I forget exactly what he says, but it's, kind of like a dismissive crack about Clark and how he's not there. It's in terms of preserving the dual identity, right? It's in Superman's interest to be oh yeah, but he won't do that. He defends
Good point.
Clark, which I really love. And I don't know, however you want to read it, as far as what that means, but I thought that was a really great touch that he defends his other identity.
I didn't catch any of this. It was probably, I've seen it so many times, I leapt over it. But now that you say all that, from a logical standpoint, you're spot on. It would, if Clark wants to separate the two and do everything he can so everyone thinks they're two independent people, he would go along with Henderson. That's a great point. But here, he stands up for his alter ego, right? I'm sure he's not twiddling his thumbs.
Well, and
Good point. That's a good point.
also because it's not like Henderson was like, oh, Clark's a piece of garbage. Like he didn't say anything that was that terrible. I think it was something to the effect of like Clark isn't here like taking advantage of the room service or like something like that. And Superman's point was like, well, like he's doing something important. But I think this kind of it's such I love this moment, but I think it kind of harkens back to the thesis that you've expressed on the show and off mic as well whenever we've talked about this, how you feel the way this show presents the characters. Clark is who he is, and then Superman is the extension of that. And I feel like this kind of lines up, right? Because this Clark isn't just a mask that Superman wears so that he can live his life. Like it's who he is, and then he puts on the Superman costume and he does what he needs to do. And so maybe it means more to him, right? Like, whereas you look at the Christopher Reeve incarnation, and by design, that was a Clark meant to be put down and dismissed. Right, and that's the function that character had
Well
to serve.
said.
But that's not the case here.
Well said. No, well said.
So it's great. And then they head off together. You know what I was wondering? We don't see how they get to the studio. How do you think they got like?
That's I driving over here. I thought about that. Like, wait a minute. He was so careful flying Dinelli like he was like a mannequin or here did they like wrap their shoulders together, and did Superman fly him? Did he fly him like a baby? It was intriguing. All I know is they didn't take a cab because you heard the whoosh,
yeah.
But I had to imprint on that hey, Clark had to lift him up and carry him like a baby,
and this guy just had 3 steaks, so he's carrying a little extra weight there.
Yeah. Now to your other point, when I forget what Henderson said, but then Clark retorts, well, I don't think he's just sitting around. What do you say?
Twiddling his thumbs.
Twiddling his thumbs, Yeah. He should have said, not like you, scarfing down all the free food, putting on the feed bag.
I know. It would have been great if we saw Superman start to pick up Henderson and be like, oh, Inspector, next time stop at 1 steak. So I guess while they're on their way, we see this mystery figure who's got the trench coat and the hat pulled down, tying
the hose.
From the car into the trailer and starting the car to fill it with carbon monoxide. And Superman and Henderson show up very shortly thereafter, and Superman quickly surmises what's going on and turns off the car, and then go for it.
No, this is exactly when Dinelli must have meant that for me. What do you mean? I mean, for Clark.
Yeah. It's great. It's so great.
He must have meant that for me, carbon monoxide.
Like he's, what it is? It's, well, I guess what I like, again, this is all kind of spontaneous as I'm thinking about this, because it's like, it's been 22 episodes now, and I'm always talking about how much I like this version of Clark. And I guess it's because this feels like such a human Clark and Superman in this show. And when he shows that anger, not that I like an overly angry Superman, but I feel like there are times when righteous anger is justified. And I feel like moments like this, it shows, again, the person he is and just the humanity.
He's not the perfect God all the time.
Right. And he's pissed. And I feel like that's why he slips in this moment, right? Like he's like annoyed. And I think that also accounts for why he threw Dinelli in that trailer. Like he's pissed at this guy.
Right. And listen, other times we spoke about his impatience with Miss Backrack, right?
Yes.
So he's not the soul of patience. He might bring kittens out of trees for little girls, but here there was like anger in his voice. Like he meant that for me, and then
for Ken. But this is my other favorite part about this scene where he tells Henderson, it's okay, you can close the door. Henderson's like, we should probably keep that door open. He's like, no, it's fine, you can close it. He's really not all that concerned with Luigi.
Yeah, what did this guy do? I mean, all we saw was that montage when his guys like put a bomb in some studio door. They burnt the film, right? They trashed certain things.
I don't know. I mean, look, he's a mob boss, so presumably, he's up to all the usual activities, and we're led to believe he's this threat, from the outset.
And I will say, and I'm sorry I didn't say this earlier, I got this episode confused with the 2 episodes in the future. I always got, what is it?
Crime Wave.
Yeah. CZAR of the Underworld and Crime Wave confused. I got them confused. But yeah, we didn't see Dinelli. 2 episodes are now. His name's nowhere on that board. Yeah. Look, Clark's cleaning up Los Angeles, and look how bad Metropolis is. They had like 20 gangs there, right? You can bring that up a month from now when you do.
I know. Like we always say, you can't look at this as a serialized story, but for argument's sake, if or hypothetically, if we did, that is kind of actually fascinating. Maybe it's like all of these gangs, these in Metropolis were able to rise while Superman's off.
Yeah.
Off in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I like that. So they see this mystery figure up in the rafters, and Superman goes up and chases him, and the guy falls and is pretty badly injured, and Henderson goes over to him, right, and he's revealed to be Frank Dinelli.
I thought Superman went to him.
Is it Super? I thought it was Henderson. Well, one of them goes to him.
Yeah.
But before he can say anything,
Well, I was going to say before that, what's interesting is they don't realize he's up there until his shoe hits a nail.
Oh yeah.
And it falls down.
Again, you would think you would use your X-ray vision and just scan or not even your X-ray vision, just use your
normal
eyes.
vision. Yeah, because he saw him pretty quickly.
Just
right?
look around.
Yeah. And then Superman flew up there, gets on the plank, so to speak. The guy empties his gun, tries to run away, falls, and kills himself. Well, I mean, he's
injured, and then Luigi finishes the job, and then Superman and Henderson apprehend him, and they're like, "We got you now." And I love Luigi's argument.
I was putting out his pain.
He was dying anyway.
Yeah, this circles back to what you said when, Frank Dinelli was in the trailer, and he's given the folder, and Clark goes, "It's the brother. We need to learn what happened and what's going on with the brother." And then what I read, or what I observed, is Luigi's killing him so he doesn't reveal something. What sort of stuff does Frank have on his brother that,
Yeah, that is a good question. And then, and then you wonder too, it's like, not that Superman wanted anyone to die, but I mean, maybe going back to what we were saying before, it's like, once Dinelli knew or thought that Clark was in the trailer, really no one needed to be there. You just had to be there to apprehend whoever came to do it. But I don't know, maybe Superman just saw the bigger picture and saw this playing out and figured he could pit Dinelli against the hitman / the brother / whoever showed up.
right?
And I don't know, get something out of him, get him to slip up, get him to say something, do something.
Yeah, if they had the two confront one another.
Yeah.
Right? See, this just circles back to the 1930s B movie serials where it's action, smash it together. Because you could have resolved it. I mean, we're looking at it through the lens of 2023, where you'd let the show breathe more. But he could have just had an empty trailer there and kind of, he could have stayed up in the rafters himself and said, "Who's going to come to hurt Clark?"
Well, and also, I mean, not to nitpick this, but it's just going back to the risk that the danger that he places Dinelli in. It's like, he has no idea exactly what time this hitman is coming.
Or if even, there's no guarantee.
Well, that's true too. Because, he's spending his time chatting up Henderson in the hotel room, talking about steaks, all this stuff. I mean, presumably, they're not wasting that much time. But also, he has no idea. All he knows is Dinelli wants him dead. See, here's the thing. If Dinelli was like, I want to, like if Clark had information that Dinelli wanted.
Or there's a hearing tomorrow morning and we got to get him to,
But it's like, he has no idea what means Dinelli is going to use. Like, someone could have just come and thrown a bomb or something. Like, he actually got lucky that it was carbon monoxide and it actually would have taken a little while, So he was a little risky there.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it all worked out. Not for Frank, though. But we end on the moment that you had alluded to earlier, where Henderson's like, "Oh, I wish Kent were here," and he's like, "He is here in a way."
Yeah. Your tone was you had the right 1950s macho tone.
Yeah, he was still fired up when he said that. It wasn't the typical Button where it's like, oh, he is in a way with a wink. It's not like he's pissed.
Yeah, yeah.
I like this. I've been a little critical of the buttons at the end of these episodes. I feel like a lot of them are they don't land right. This one was still abrupt. I agree with you. Like we needed another beat or two after this, but this was better than some of the other ones.
Well,
that we've
better
done.
than
Your favorite one.
Yeah, yeah. No holds barred. You know, yeah. The only true magic, the magic of knowledge. Well, wait a minute. That's totally contradictory. Yeah, they didn't button this was. It's like they had another 30 seconds to go.
I don't know. Maybe they needed to fill time, and then they overshot the mark with the Perry scene, and then they were like, "Oh, we gotta cut." I mean, I don't know. That could have just been smoothed out. I think you take away some or all of the Perry scene, you add a little bit at the end, and I think you're good to go.
Yeah, but if I may, then possibly the best ending might have been cutting to another scene the next morning, where Clark is finishing typing and he goes, I got to get this to the teletype to get it to Perry,
Yes.
right? This will wrap the whole thing up. Yeah, it was just so abrupt. But like you said, there was so much edge in his voice,
Is there anything on your list of notes that we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about?
So we covered what happened to Clark's super hearing. No, we covered everything. The only thing that I found beyond the realm of plausibility was the fact, and again, I don't know if Dinelli, like you said, was transplanted out to the coast.
This is really tripping you up, the fact that he's LA based. I hear you.
But how did his brother get the job as a security chief, for the same studio that's doing the movie? I mean, that was such...
You're right. In that sense, it actually would make more sense if he were just like a police chief generally, right? Because it would make sense. You would want him installed in that kind of position
to help
generally.
Yeah, to protect or shut down investigations or run interference for his brother, but to be a studio security chief. And in the very studio, I mean, that's making this expose movie, I would have liked it had he been more of a police chief in the Los Angeles Police Department, but even that might have been a stretch.
I mean, IMDb could be wrong. Again, I'd be curious, audience members, if you have any insight as to exactly what position the brother occupied. I would love to know. Again, when Rich and I both watched this a couple of years ago, we assumed he was a police chief, and it definitely required a suspension of disbelief that even with the passage of time and a facelift, that this ex-convict could rise to that position. That was a huge stretch.
Yeah, their hiring practices, they didn't do much detailed.
But as to your point, it's like it is almost more incredulous that he was able to get this job in this amount of time, in time for this movie. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious where other people land on this.
Yeah, for me, it's more incredulous because I don't think he came right in as the security chief or chief of security. For
you got to work your way up.
Yeah, right. Plus the fact you had all these years. How did you explain the years in Sing Sing or, The Rock or wherever you were out there? And the plastic surgery, right? So maybe background checks were much more bland and lenient.
Look, with technology generally, yeah, I mean, I certainly can believe that you could get away with far more and that someone could kind of reinvent themselves in that way to an extent. I don't know. Still a very fun episode. Before we give our rating, again, we talked about Henderson. He loves his room service. We talked about you traveled a lot. Do you like room service, or do you prefer to get out and about when you're?
I prefer to get out. There are times I will do room service, more for time and convenience. But I like to get out to at least see part of the city I'm in. But it depends on okay, am I landing? Am I getting into the hotel room at 9:15 and let me order something now? Room service closes at 10. It varies. uh, Bill Henderson's primary mission was putting that feed bag on.
Yes, for sure. No, I agree. I think it's and there's something that I have always found appealing about room service. I mean, obviously the price is absurd, and they hit you with all those service charges, and especially since I've been traveling with my wife for the past decade, and she's always about exploring the wherever we are, and so I'm definitely on board with that. I think that's the way to go. But I like, especially when I've traveled for work, and I don't do that anymore. But in that instance where I'm really not there for like sightseeing, but I'm really there for like a very specific purpose, I found it handy for breakfast in particular. I do, especially when you have your place, you have the option, you can like put it on the door the night before when you want, and then that I like. That I'm like in Bill Henderson happy mode with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like the breakfast. It comes to the door, you get your pot of coffee. I do like that.
Interesting. See, I've never done breakfast. Room service breakfast. Never. Usually I would be checking out, I'd go down, I'd check out, I'd throw my bags in the car and come back and get breakfast. Or I get breakfast and then go get my bags and check out. But I like, if I can, I don't want to eat in the hotel room if I can.
I hear you. All right, Czar of the Underworld. Out of 5 fedoras, Rich Roney, our most frequent guest for season 1. How many fedoras would you give this one?
4.
4. I'm going 4.5. I feel like normally I'm either on the same page. We have the same rating.
I thought last time you told me I couldn't do half.
No, you could do halves.
Oh, because no, I remember last time I made the joke, 3 and a silk robe.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
that we won't get into that business,
okay.
But yeah, you could do halves. But you don't have to go with your gut.
No, I'm going to go with 4, and that's a lot of my basis of that is I'm looking at this like a bell curve, and I want to make the ones that are truly 5s, like Panic in the Sky or The Face and the Voice or some other things. This was good. Quite frankly, I think this was every bit as good as No Holds Barred. Every bit as good. No, I'm content with a 4. I mean, my detractions are some of the implausibility of one, Perry, the rant from Perry was filler in my mind. So that was like, you guys, I know you're pumping it out, but stay up late and rewrite it a little bit. So Perry's rant annoyed me. Some of the goofs with the lamp falling and then the gun, and then all the stuff, like, quite frankly, why did he have to take Dinelli to the trailer? I mean, he could have caught Frank, forced Frank to confess, and then gone and beaten the snot out of him in his apartment.
It's funny because, I love how specific we get when we talk about these episodes, and it's fun. But I guess sometimes it can backfire and have the unintended consequence of, like, especially with an episode that you enjoyed. And then the more we talk about it, you find these holes in it, and there are certain things that don't line up. But listen, 4 is still a great score. I don't know. I'm going to stay with 4.5. I really just I had so much fun with this one. Really, for me, that Perry scene was the only thing that I really took away from it. Otherwise, things like the lamp or whatever, that kind of stuff doesn't really bug me. And there were enough of those Clark and Superman moments. And again, some really interesting character moments, whether intended or not. But as we watch it, like when Superman defends Clark, little things like that, I get a lot of mileage out of. So yeah, I'm going to go with 4.5. I thought this was really one of the stronger season 1 episodes. I thank you very much, Rich, for coming back, for doing this 3rd episode. I'll talk more about this when it gets closer. We're going to have, I think, a very, very significant break between seasons 1 and 2. But once we get into season 2, I look forward to having you back. And I think we'll break your record of 3 appearances next season. I think we can maybe do a little more than that if you're game.
I'm game. All right. I'm game. Thank you for having me.
Listen, my pleasure. This really was a lot of fun. Again, that's the thing. And I know I've said versions of this, but it's like when there's an episode I don't like, the conversation is still always enjoyable, and that sort of redeems the overall experience. And when there is an episode that I really did like, it's even more fun. So either way, it's always great to talk about these. So thank you very much. Thank you, audience. I really do always appreciate you tuning in, whether you listen or watch. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Ghost Wolf. We're really nearing the end here. I hope you'll tune in. Adventures await. This show is part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network, home to Digging for Kryptonite, another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, Summoning the Zords, and My Comic Shop History, available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review today. Sign up at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato for additional content. Thank you all.